In the panorama of the ancient city, this place immediately catches the eye. The Dome of the Rock is one of the most famous Muslim sanctuaries in the world. It stands on the site of the First and Second Jerusalem temples. Both were destroyed thousands of years ago. During the destruction of the First and Second temples, the city burned so fiercely, so brightly, and so intensely that it literally became like a scorching cauldron. The history of the First Jerusalem temple is surrounded by numerous legends. Its construction is associated with King Solomon, who lived in the 10th century BCE. The building took 7 years to erect. A grand celebration was held in honor of its consecration. The festivities lasted 2 weeks. Solomon's temple quickly became the center of religious, cultural, and even economic life in Jerusalem. It existed for more than 300 years before it was destroyed. The Babylonian ruler Nebuchadnezzar II captured Jerusalem. His army first plundered the temple and then literally erased it from the face of the earth. The Second Jerusalem temple was built on the site of the first, about 70 years later, in the early 6th century BCE. During this time, the Persian king Cyrus the Great ruled, and later Herod the Great reconstructed the temple. It was in this temple, according to the Bible, that Jesus Christ preached. The building was destroyed during the First Jewish War in the 1st century CE. This happened on the same day, the 9th of Av in the Jewish calendar, when the Babylonians burned down Solomon's temple. The 9th of Av is a day of national mourning for the Jewish people. It is still declared every summer. The date is movable. The terrible events described in the sacred texts are not legends. Historians have been able to prove that all this really happened. Radiocarbon dating and the Earth's magnetic field helped them in this. The difference between the two methods is actually significant. Researchers very rarely resort to measuring radiation in historical spaces because it is considered an extremely complex method. In addition to requiring very serious economic costs, it is an unusually expensive method. However, its main essence lies in measuring the presence of radioactive elements that have been preserved for centuries. Simply put, during their lives, all organisms absorb radioactive and regular carbon from the environment. Consequently, this chemical element is present in every living being. After death, carbon begins to decay, and every 5,000 years its amount is halved. Scientists look at how many radioactive elements remain in fossil remains and thus determine their age. The accuracy is impressive, plus or minus 15 years. However, scientists say this method also has its nuances. These methods can establish the age of objects no more than 50,000 years old. Unfortunately, this method is not always accurate, and it can only determine the age of organic objects. In other cases, it does not provide precise dating. Accuracy begins to falter significantly when it comes to a specific period in history, from the 8th to the mid-5th century BCE. During these centuries, the sun produced too little radioactive carbon, so the method based on analyzing the content of this element works poorly and often fails. It is precisely in such complex cases that archaeologists turn to the Earth's magnetic field. The archaeomagnetic method helped confirm the biblical date of the burning of Jerusalem. During excavations in the city of David, the oldest inhabited area, scientists discovered the ruins of a once grand building. Inside, they found pottery shards and ceramic fragments. The archaeomagnetic method showed that the structure was burned in the same year as Solomon's temple. And that's not all. As a result of the second geomagnetic method, researchers were able to establish almost the participants in the conflict because, until a certain point, the biblical story does not precisely tell which groups, specifically which Babylonian army units, participated in the destruction of the temple. After this, it became known that the groups involved were among the most elite units of the Babylonian army. Completely new information, not found in ancient documents, inspired Israeli scientists. Archaeologists and geophysicists surveyed about 24 sites across the country and were able to accurately date 21 historical layers. Thanks to the archaeomagnetic method, scorched stones told the story of long-past events. What does it consist of? The Earth's outer core, which consists of molten iron, changes its position because the iron is molten and its flows move quite chaotically. Due to the chaotic movement of this iron, the Earth's magnetic field is constantly changing. However, If at that moment rock, clay, or stone is heated intensely, a small miracle occurs. It has been observed that when heated, some objects, such as clay formations or those containing iron, remember this field, that is, the field that existed at that time. This happens because the ferromagnetic particles contained in these objects realign when heated. They acquire the direction of the Earth's magnetic field and become magnetized, essentially recording its magnetism. Thus, a burnt shard of an old cup turns into something like a flash drive with recorded data about when the fire occurred, and scientists have learned to extract such information. This greatly simplifies their work. The gray areas in history are becoming fewer. One of the most interesting discoveries is related to the end of the Kingdom of Judah. Researchers reconstructed the Earth's magnetic field as it was on the 9th of Av in 586 BCE, the day of the destruction of the First Temple and all of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. Some scholars argue that the Babylonians did not destroy all of Judah. Cities in the southern foothills remained almost untouched. They were soon virtually wiped out by the Edomites, who took advantage of Jerusalem's fall. This explains why the Old Testament reflects such hostility toward the Edomites. The book of the prophet Obadiah accuses them of betrayal. The archaeomagnetic method also shed light on the fate of the ancient city of Beit Shean. Its ruins are located in the northern district of Israel, in the Jordan Valley. In 925 BCE, the city was plundered and destroyed. Scholars long debated who did it. Initially, two existing figures were considered the culprits of this tragedy. On one hand, Pharaoh Shoshenq of Egypt, and on the other, the ruler of Damascus. The intensity and direction of the magnetic field showed that the city burned at the end of the 9th century BCE. It was precisely then that the Egyptians invaded these territories. The Arameans, however, conquered parts of the Holy Land a century later. Specifically, the weapons found in the destroyed buildings are exclusively of Egyptian origin. The Damascene army did not possess such weapons. Equally important is that this method of warfare and the destruction of settlements was characteristic of Shoshenq I. To unravel the true causes of the destruction of two other famous biblical cities, archaeologists had to turn to radiocarbon analysis. It is still unknown what happened to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah described in the Bible. However, radiocarbon dating showed that the pottery found approximately at the site of these cities is covered with small mineral formations that fuse together, which could only have occurred during a very powerful explosion. This suggests the possibility that a massive meteorite struck these cities. In the sacred texts, the destruction of the cities is described as divine punishment for the sins of their inhabitants. Now scientists know the threat likely came from the sky. Everything within a radius of dozens of kilometers was buried under layers of ash and salt, most likely from the Dead Sea. Hundreds of neighboring settlements were abandoned for centuries. The idea of an atmospheric explosion caused by a meteorite was met with mixed reactions in the scientific community. Research and debates on this topic continue. Specialists hope that with the help of these two dating methods, they will eventually be able to reconstruct all the circumstances of this ancient catastrophe.